New York City, 1833. The streets thrum with noise, horses clattering over cobblestones, vendors shouting, children darting between carriages. Suddenly, another voice cuts through the chaos, the shrill cry of a newsboy. In his hand, a newspaper, bold and brash, selling not for 6 cents, but for a single penny. Until now, newspapers had belonged to the elite. Merchants, bankers, and politicians could afford them. The working poor, immigrants, and laborers were left in the dark, excluded from the daily conversation of a growing nation. But this was different. The penny press shattered the barrier, carrying news from the grand halls of power down to the crowded alleys of the city. Ordinary people, for the first time, could buy the world in print. They read about crime in their streets, scandals in their neighborhoods, disasters and triumphs that touched their daily lives. Knowledge, once locked away, became theirs for the price of a loaf of bread. It was more than a newspaper. It was a revolution, a spark that gave voice to the voiceless, power to the many, and shaped democracy in a young republic. The story of the penny press had begun. Before the 1830s, American newspapers were exclusive. Costing 6 cents, they catered to merchants, bankers, and politicians, those with money and influence. They were filled with shipping news, stock prices, and political essays, far removed from the lives of laborers, immigrants, and the poor who crowded America's growing cities. Then came Benjamin Day, a young printer in New York. In 1833, he launched the Sun, a paper that cost just a single penny. His vision was radical, a newspaper not for the wealthy few but for everyone. For the first time, newsboys shouted headlines to passers-by who could actually afford to buy them. A new audience, clerks, seamstresses, apprentices, and factory workers, suddenly found themselves with a voice in the printed world. Day filled his paper with stories people cared about. Crime on local streets, fires and accidents, gossip, humor, and human drama. Readers devoured tales of scandal and tragedy, stories written in lively language instead of lofty rhetoric. The Sun shined light not on elite politics but on ordinary life. The formula was simple, yet revolutionary. Make it cheap, make it interesting, and sell it everywhere. Within months, circulation soared. Other printers soon followed his lead, and the penny press became a movement. What began as a gamble by one printer became a transformation in American democracy. News was no longer chained to the wealthy. For a penny, the public gained its first true voice. The penny press was not just a change in price, it was a revolution in technology and business. At the heart of this transformation stood the steam-powered printing press. Where older hand presses could turn out only a few hundred sheets in an hour, the new machines roared through thousands. Newspapers could now be produced in bulk, fast enough to match the appetite of a city hungry for stories. This flood of cheap papers reshaped the economics of journalism. Traditional newspapers relied on costly subscriptions paid by wealthy merchants and professionals. But Benjamin Day and his rivals discovered a new model: advertising. By selling space to shopkeepers, theater owners, and product makers, the penny paper could keep its price at 1 cent and still profit. The more readers it reached, the more valuable its advertising pages became. It was a perfect loop. Cheap price brought mass readership. Mass readership attracted advertisers. Advertisers funded more cheap papers. The cycle fed itself, and soon presses thundered day and night to satisfy demand. But beyond numbers, the steam press symbolized something greater: the harnessing of industrial power for public knowledge. With every churn of gears and hiss of steam, democracy was being printed, folded, and sold for a penny. The penny press was not only a journalistic innovation, it was a business machine, one that blended technology, commerce, and public hunger into a force that would redefine the role of news in American life. What made the penny press irresistible was not only its price, but its voice. For the first time, newspapers spoke the language of ordinary people. Instead of dry columns on trade or politics, the penny papers filled their pages with stories of life as it was lived on the streets. Crime was their staple. Murders, robberies, and courtroom dramas spilled across bold headlines. Fires and accidents were reported with vivid detail, capturing both tragedy and spectacle. Human interest stories, lost children, heroic rescues, curious oddities, drew readers who had never seen their own world reflected in print. The style was fresh and accessible. Articles were short, dramatic, and easy to read. They were written for clerks, laborers, immigrants, and women, audiences long ignored by elite newspapers. Readers could finally find themselves, their neighborhoods, and their struggles in the pages of the press. But the content was not only scandal and sensation. Penny papers also published humor, advice, and serialized stories that entertained as much as they informed. For many families, a penny paper became the evening's entertainment, read aloud in kitchens and workshops. The strategy worked. Circulation soared into tens of thousands, numbers unthinkable for the 6-cent dailies. Critics accused the penny press of pandering to the lowest tastes, but the truth was undeniable. It had given the public what it wanted most: news that felt alive, immediate, and theirs. The press was no longer just about power, it had become about people. The penny press gave birth to a new figure on the streets of American cities: the newsboy. Barefoot, loud, and determined, these children became the lifeblood of circulation. They were not employees of the paper, but small entrepreneurs. They bought stacks of papers in bulk at a discount, then resold them one by one, pocketing the difference. Every cry of "read all about it" was not only an advertisement, but a bid for survival. In New York, hundreds of newsboys filled the streets, clustering near train stations, ferry docks, and markets. Their voices pierced the city's constant noise, competing to grab attention. Some shouted sensational headlines: murders, fires, scandals, while others darted between carriages, waving their papers in the faces of passers-by. They turned headlines into theater, making the news itself a performance. For many, it was a hard life. These children worked in heat, snow, and rain. They slept in alleys, fought over selling corners, and sometimes sold nothing at all. Yet they gave the penny press its soul. Through their cries, the news reached not only the wealthy, but also workers, immigrants, and families rushing through crowded streets. The newsboy embodied both opportunity and exploitation, symbols of American grit, yet reminders of poverty's harsh grip. Without them, the penny press would never have conquered the city. Their voices carried democracy in print, one penny at a time. The penny press did more than sell stories. It changed the very fabric of American society. For the first time, immigrants, laborers, and women could afford daily news. A single copper coin gave them access to the world beyond their street or workshop. Literacy spread as thousands bought papers not for school or study, but for curiosity and survival. To read the news was to claim a place in the public conversation. Politicians quickly realized the power of this new audience. Penny papers could rally crowds, expose corruption, or spark reform. A sensational headline could sway an election or stir protest in ways the 6-cent journals never imagined. Democracy itself widened, as those once excluded from debate now found themselves informed, opinionated, and ready to speak. Social reform movements also rode the wave. Campaigns against slavery, for temperance, and for workers' rights all found voice in the penny pages. Sometimes the coverage was biased, exaggerated, or shamelessly sensational, but it carried the issues into homes and workshops where silence had reigned before. Of course, critics worried that the penny press cheapened discourse, replacing reason with spectacle. Yet even they could not deny its impact. It put power into the hands of ordinary people, one story at a time. The press was no longer a mirror for the elite. It had become a weapon of persuasion, a chorus of voices, and a stage on which democracy itself could speak. The success of the Sun did not go unnoticed. By the late 1830s, rival penny papers sprang up across New York, each fighting for readers with bolder headlines, faster reporting, and sharper voices. James Gordon Bennett launched the Herald in 1835, mixing crime and scandal with financial news and biting commentary. Horace Greeley followed with the Tribune, offering reformist zeal and moral urgency. And soon came the Times, combining ambition with respectability. The competition was fierce. Each paper raced to break news first, sending reporters into crime scenes, courtrooms, and disaster sites. Stories became more dramatic, more immediate. Sensation sold, and the penny papers embraced it with relentless energy. The streets echoed with rival newsboys, shouting louder, each trying to win the crowd with their version of the day's drama. But expansion also meant innovation. Papers experimented with illustrations, serialized novels, and foreign correspondence. They stretched beyond New York, inspiring penny presses in Boston, Philadelphia, and Chicago. By the 1840s, the movement had grown into a nationwide force. Together, these papers transformed journalism from an elite organ into a battlefield of ideas, entertainment, and influence. They fought for attention, but in doing so, they widened the reach of information like never before. The penny press was no longer an experiment. It had become an industry, one that would shape not only the business of news, but the very way Americans understood their world. By the mid-19th century, the penny press had permanently altered the landscape of American journalism. What began as a 1-cent gamble in a New York print shop had grown into a nationwide industry, shaping how people consumed news and how democracy itself functioned. The legacy of the penny press rests on its accessibility. For the first time, newspapers reached beyond the elite and spoke directly to workers, immigrants, women, and families. The stories might have been sensational, the headlines exaggerated, but the effect was undeniable. The public had been invited into the conversation of the nation. Its influence extended far beyond its time. The reliance on advertising revenue became the model for modern media, from 19th-century illustrated magazines to 20th-century radio and television, and even today's digital platforms. The obsession with bold headlines, human interest stories, and speed of reporting lives on in tabloids, cable news, and viral online journalism. Yet the penny press also left behind difficult questions. Did it strengthen democracy by making information widely available, or weaken it by encouraging spectacle over substance? Was it a tool of empowerment or manipulation? What cannot be denied is its endurance. The penny press gave voice to millions, reshaped the business of news, and turned the act of reading a daily paper into a ritual of modern life. And so we end with a question. In today's world of instant headlines and endless feeds, are we witnessing the birth of another penny press, only this time on glowing screens?